A 6-foot tall black man sprints through the flames of a burning theater and out into the woods. Cradled in his arms is the freshly severed and still bleeding head of Oda Nobunaga, the man once known as Japan's great unifier. That night, Nobunaga had been betrayed, but it wasn't by the man carrying his head. That man was Yasuke. He was a samurai who served Nobunaga. You've probably heard of him at some point. Video games, TV series, and countless YouTube videos, including this one, are all based on his life. But more often than not, they delve into the world of fantasy or debate whether he was a samurai or not. But history is a conversation, and this is a conversation where fact is stranger than fiction. The story of Yasuke is one that can be told many different ways. The story begins in Africa, where nobody is sure. The two prevailing theories are that he was born in Mozambique, which was controlled by Portugal at the time, or he was born to the Dinka people of South Sudan. However, what we are sure of is that the written history picks up in Portugal, where he meets Alessandro Valignano. Alessandro was a Jesuit priest from Naples. Funny enough, he got a doctorate in law at 19 while living in Rome. It was only after he returned home that he would join the church. This would lead to him being sent around the world, notably India, where he was sent to help rebuild faith in the Catholic Church. He had an ability to draw crowds, partially because he was a tall, dark-skinned Italian man, and you know what they say about dark-skinned Italian. When he traveled to Portugal, his ability to draw a crowd increased because that's where he met Yasuke, who was an even taller and darker man. The two would leave Portugal and travel to Japan. Alessandro is notable as an individual due to his study of languages, allowing him not only to preach in multiple languages, but to trade and practice diplomacy as well. This included being one of the first Europeans fluent in Chinese. During his time in Japan, the Jesuits gained control of Nagasaki and turned it from a one-street town into an international port. Now, he did draw ire from some sects of the Catholic Church for essentially doing too much to help Asian countries, especially Japan. Wherever he went, he helped improve living conditions and commerce. So they were upset that he wasn't just teaching Catholicism. But that's why he's in this video, and whoever the Pope in 1585 that tried to end his travels isn't. Some writings list Yasuke as a slave to Alessandro, but this has been frequently reported as a typo or even deliberate mistranslation. History is just cool like that. Many writings refer to him as a servant to the Jesuit order, also known as the Society of Jesus, a group of male clerics tasked with evangelizing for the Catholic Church. Lorenzo Messia was a Jesuit priest, much like Alessandro. His writings are often used to give credibility to the idea that Yasuke was a slave because he stated Yasuke knew tricks, but this is really just a dated way to say he had good manners. Nobunaga referred to him as a monk. Matsuda Larida's writings make reference to him being paid. It's not really important if he were enslaved, a servant, or a monk. Slavery is something that happens to a person, not who a person is. In 1581, something happened. Alessandro arrives in Japan to meet with Oda Nobunaga in what is now Osaka, Japan. Rising up from a warlord to the leader of his own clan, Oda Nobunaga once pledged that he would be the man that would unify Japan and bring peace to the warring regions. Nobody at the time thought it could be done, but he was confident, once claiming, "We were born in order to die. Whoever is with me, come to the battlefield tomorrow morning. Whoever is not, just stay wherever you are and watch me win it." Over time, he would expand his territories, starting with Owari, then Imajiwa, and Kyoto. He became seen as the leader of Japan because he had so much under his control, even if there were still plenty of independent regions. Alongside his vassal, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, and his ally, Tokugawa Ieyasu, who would continue after his death. The three are known as Japan's great unifiers. Years before his death, however, Oda had a meeting with Alessandro. Before they can arrive at the meeting, civilians mob the Jesuits, not because they're trying to cause them harm, but because they just want to look at Yasuke. People were climbing on roofs, a massive crowd had formed, people were shoving, pushing, shouting. The scene was chaos, and they were all doing this just to get a better look at Yasuke. Sure, Africans had been in Japan before, but usually they would only be seen in port cities, never so far inland. On the rare event that they did see an African, they weren't near as big as Yasuke. Thomas Lackley, who writes for Encyclopedia Britannica, and a few other researchers have theorized this could also be because black skin was seen as holy in the region. This is due to their depictions of Buddha being depicted with black skin. Others theorize this could simply be the way the paint is aged due to the inclusion of lead, but if you look at similar depictions from outside of Japan, such as the Himalayas, they depicted Buddha with brown skin at the time as well. Again, perhaps this is a way the paint has aged, but from what I've seen, nobody's been brave enough to scrape off the paint and see if that's the case. These could also be depictions of Magellana, one of Buddha's disciples who was said to have dark skin and would visit heaven to teach the Dhamma. Historians seem split in three ways, but nobody is brave enough to scrape the paint, so all we can say is, maybe. Nobunaga hears the commotion outside and demands that the cause be investigated. Outside, they witness Yasuke and the Jesuits at the center of the mob. Once dispersed, the meeting can take place. Nobunaga wasn't really concerned with Alessandro or the other Jesuits. He was more so impressed by Yasuke's stature as well as his manners. Just to refresh, black people had been to Japan before and often worked ports, but we're talking Osaka, which is not known as a port city. And to add to that, we're pretty far away from the ocean. Oda was a warlord who became a clan leader. He is not going to the ports. Nobunaga is so in disbelief, he has his sons bathe Yasuke with the best soaps available. When his skin remains brown, he celebrated. He threw a banquet in Yasuke's honor, the best food and drinks money could buy, topped off with giving him actual money. In his own writing, Nobunaga would express excitement over Yasuke, stating he's well built, black as a cow, strong as 10 men. He asked Alessandro to allow Yasuke to stay with him, and Alessandro sees this as an opportunity to spread Catholicism, so he agrees. For his part, there was no objection from Yasuke either. The time spent early on in Japan was used to teach him how to read and speak Japanese. Again, Nobunaga wrote how impressed he was with the speed at which Yasuke picked it up. This is actually when he's given the name Yasuke, which translates to the black one. And I had to admit, it's clever and kind of funny. Now this is where the biggest controversy surrounding Yasuke comes in. Was Yasuke really a samurai? In a vacuum, solitary facts can be used to claim that he was not a samurai. But when everything is put together, it's very simple. Yasuke received an annual stipend, like all samurai. But others will state the pay doesn't make him one because sandal carriers were also paid a stipend. But here's the thing, Yasuke didn't carry sandals. He carried a sword and his pay was in line with other samurai, not sandal carriers. You do not keep someone you do not trust next to you with a sword if you're Nobunaga. The next issue seems to be the kanji. The kanji for samurai is the same as the kanji for page and squire. Now, in English history, a page is a servant to a knight, and a squire is a knight's shield bearer or apprentice. It would be understandable to not call them knights, but we're not talking about English history. We're not talking about German history, or Spanish history, or French history, or anything else. We're talking Japanese history. And both pages and squires had full samurai rights. Samurai is a class, and elder samurai may take on a young apprentice, but they were both samurai. If his job was assistant or apprentice, he would be called kosho, but that's not the case. It never has been. Much of the dispute hinges on the fact that he was not Japanese, and that's fine. There have been other samurai who were not Japanese. Take for instance, Jan Justin van Luderstein, whose name I just butchered, was Dutch, and William Adams, who was British. They were both samurai for Tokugawa Ieyasu. Like Yasuke, they carry swords. We're given a stipend. We're given a residence. So race is out of the question. A samurai can be any race. A lot of people claim you can't be a samurai without a surname, and Yasuke was never given a surname. Since I've already brought him up, the name Yaosu, sometimes Yasuten, was given to Jan Justin van Lorenstein. Notice the lack of surname, yet nobody questions he was a samurai. Now we've established that surnames are not required. Lorenzo Messia would write that during his visits, people would often refer to Yasuke as future lord, which is not something you say to a sandal carrier, kosho, or non-samurai. In a vacuum, you can hyper-focus on one fact and come to a conclusion, but that's a vacuum. Outside of that vacuum, you have to look at the whole picture. If you'd like to focus on just a few facts, let it be that Japanese scholars and the family of Oda Nobunaga have repeatedly stated that Yasuke was a samurai. There's nothing else to debate here. Throughout April and May of 1582, Nobunaga's oldest son, Nobutada, is on an expedition. Yasuke is one of the samurai in his party. During this time, it's recorded that his height is 6'2" officially, so he was a big samurai, having big fun. But things change. On June 21st, 1582, Nobunaga, Yasuke, and many others stopped to rest for the night at the Honno-ji temple where they first met. Little did they know it would be the temple where they parted ways forever. That night they sang, drank, and they rested for the upcoming day. Yet before the sun could rise, gunshots echoed throughout the town and smoke filled the skies. Akachi Mitsuhide, one of Nobunaga's longtime vassals, was staging a rebellion. They burned the temple and surrounded the exits with 13,000 men. Akachi Mitsuhide had come to join Oda Nobunaga when he took Kyoto. Mitsuhide was taking care of government duties at the time as a constable when Nobunaga took Kyoto. Nobunaga was impressed with his work, so he gave him the Shinga district. While overseeing the construction of several castles and assisting in battles, Mitsuhide gained Nobunaga's trust, eventually being given an entire province and being put in charge of military demonstrations. On June 2nd, 1582, Mitsuhide had been told to suppress the Mori clan. Instead, he told the soldiers that the enemy is in Honno-ji Temple. As I write this, we still don't know why he chose to attack Nobunaga that day. Many of the troops had no idea that they were even marching to attack Oda. Outside the temple, he waits for Nobunaga to surrender, but it doesn't happen. Instead, Nobunaga gives his final orders before committing ritual suicide known as seppuku by cutting across his own belly with his sword. Yasuke does not have time to mourn. He must complete his final order. He lifts his sword and cuts Nobunaga's head from his body. Nobunaga knows that Akechi's rebellion cannot succeed without his head. As the bodies burn and become unrecognizable, Yasuke takes a back exit and he flees through the forest, but not before drawing the attention of several attackers. He's been tasked with returning Nobunaga's head to Nobutada. When he arrives in modern Kyoto, Nobutada has already barricaded himself inside Nijo Castle. Yasuke joins the fight, but they don't last long against the seemingly endless waves of attackers and firebombs. Seeing the end, Nobutada follows his father's footsteps. He commits seppuku as well, but not before instructing Yasuke to flee and hide both their heads. By the time Yasuke is captured, both heads are long gone. In 2025, the heads are still missing. When Mitsuhide executes Nobunaga and Nobutada's loyalists, he doesn't kill Yasuke, because in his words, black ones aren't Japanese, they are mere animals. For just 2 weeks, Mitsuhide reigns. During this time, he wrote many poems, but never any justification for his actions. The poems were filled with prose such as, "There are few differences between rebelling and serving. Only because I respect Emperor as my lord. With my ambition of 55 years fading away, I will return to my lord of everything." He stated this, as well as, "I don't mind what others say, and they cannot understand my intention. I don't want life nor honor." Another of Nobunaga's vassals, Hasegawa Hideyoshi, heard of the betrayal. He viewed the betrayal as dishonorable. He was in the midst of battle himself, but he quickly overwhelmed the enemy and forced a peace treaty before immediately marching towards Mitsuhide with his own army. The arrival of his soldiers caused most of Mitsuhide's soldiers to flee, as they initially had no idea they were even part of a plan to overthrow Nobunaga, and they knew it could not be viewed as legitimate without the heads. Mitsuhide and his remaining men are slaughtered without mercy. Yasuke had already been taken to the Jesuits and abandoned there, completely unaware Nobunaga had been avenged. The Jesuits were eager to hear his stories, but they had to wait for another time, because without Nobunaga's protection, the Jesuits are forced out of Japan by threat of execution. 5 months later, still being referred to as Yasuke, it's written that he had been healed of his injuries, and they were happy to have him back with them. From here, he vanishes from history. I know people wonder why the writing stopped, but think about it. He likely just went back to normal work. There's no legend to it. There isn't much written about him before his arrival in Japan either. Why would there be writing after? It's similar to a person who has a really big film role or a huge music single and then goes back to regular work. We wouldn't know Jeffrey Owens was working at a grocery store if some nosy person hadn't tried to shame him for it. It's no different with Yasuke.